Good evening, friends. The topic of today's discussion in this teleconferencing session is democracy in search of equality. This topic belongs to the course EPS 12, Government and Politics in India. But it is relevant to other courses of political science dealing with Indian politics, like India Democracy and Development, which is an MPS course, Social Movements and State Politics in India. For these courses also this topic is relevant. In fact, for our today's discussion, we have Professor R.K. Barik, who is a Professor of Political Science in Indian Institute of Public Administration. Professor Barik has done extensive work on different aspects of democracy, which specifically deal with equality. He has worked on JP movement. In fact, his was the first work to deal with the JP movement in India. Apart from that, he has worked on land reforms in India. His works are related to the removal of inequality, to the achievement of the social justice and equality in the society. Before I invite Professor Barik to reflect upon the issue today's discussion, that is democracy in search of equality, I would like to give a little bit of background. In fact, the equality is an important segment of a democratic society. Equality, fraternity, liberty, these form important segments, of which equality is the most important, is one of the most important. Specifically in case of India, equality is an important aspect, because equality is related to the self-respect, dignity, the very aspect, very nature of human being, to the survival of human being. It's related to all these aspects with which are related to the social justice and the democracy in any country. In our country, the equality occupies an special importance because of the diversities and inequalities of various kinds. When our country became independent, we had inherited all kinds of diversities and inequalities, be it the caste-based inequality, religious-based inequality, regional inequalities, or gender-based inequalities. Not only this, when country became independent and it became a sovereign republic, then we had different regional backgrounds in the country, which included the states, the region which was governed by the British India and the many princely states. Because of the diverse policies of princely states and the government and the British government, there were various levels of the development, various levels of the equality issues involved in this. So in this background, when we became independent, the country's government, state had a very big challenge. The challenge was how to achieve equality, how to bring about the social recognition to the neglected groups of the society. For this, the state introduced various measures, and these measures were introduced in the light of the philosophy which is given in our constitution. The preamble of our constitution, the directive principles of the state policy, fundamental rights, they enshrine several aspects, several features which aim at removing the inequalities and bringing about the social justice and dignity to the people. When the country became independent, at various levels, the government, the state introduced the policies for the removal of inequality. One aspect of it was introduction of the land reforms. In fact, because of the land reforms, the earlier unequal land system gave equality to different kinds of tenants. The land cultivators of the land became the owners of the land also. This was one aspect. Another aspect was introduction of various welfare measures. And then in the end, there was, in the 1960s, Green Revolution was introduced in the country. So various measures were introduced by the state in the country, in various parts of the country. By the 1970s, we find emergence of various social groups, and these social groups are now occupying important place in Indian democracy. The emergence of various social groups, which then got mobilized, which started participating, and in fact some of them started playing important role in the decision making in the running of the government. This all is in fact achievement of the India's search of equality. India's for equality is not yet complete. It's going on. So within this framework, we are going to analyze various aspects of India's search for equality. Now, I would like Professor Barik to reflect upon this. How does he view this entire issue of Indian democracy and equality? Professor Barik, please.
Thank you, Dr. Jagpal. And Jagpal has raised three critical points. That here society is based on unequal relationship, both in terms of social inequality, also economic inequality, and political inequality. At the time of independence, when constitutional democracy was evolving, they confronted three things. And constitutional democracy first time gave political equality. And they expected political equality will help in bringing radical social changes, also bringing economic changes, which he has already reflected a little bit. Let me analyze why it is very critical. Actually, if you compare with Western countries, Western democracy, it is interesting. All Western countries, they realized social equality in their society, and which is called as a civil society. Civil society basic philosophy is this is the based on principle of equality. And in India, it is political democracy became a force behind this bringing social equality. Why? Because Indian society was a hierarchical social structure. This hierarchical social structure, which is based on one over other, this hierarchical social structure in terms of caste, also in terms of gender. These two critical aspects of inequality, caste inequality, gender inequality. This social structure was supposed to be demolished by the Indian political democracy and or Indian political state. This is the most critical, and this is the most critical aspect of Indian Constitution also. That's why the Constitution, as Austin, the most important authority on Indian Constitution, says it is a springboard of social revolution. This is a very critical point. And why it is called springboard of social revolution? If you look at right to equality, Article 14, 15, 16, it is just, if you compare with the American democracy, American Constitution, where right to equality is written in one sentence, equality before law. Here there are three things are included. Equality before law, number one. Number two, that discrimination on the basis of caste, gender, religion are banned. Number two. Number three, that also there is a protective discrimination. The policy of protective discrimination. There is in the same Article 14, 15, 16 discussing issues of reservation for weaker section, for scheduled caste, for scheduled tribe, OBC. That's why it is a three dimensions, or it is a package. It is a social package, you can say. This social package is has it succeeded to bring social engineering or social change? This social package we have to explain. That's why Indian Constitution is a very, as Austin argues, only two constitutions have played a very creative role. Written constitution, that is one is the American Constitution, another is the Indian Constitution. And this Indian Constitution, in this case of breaking social inequality, breaking caste system, breaking hierarchical relationship, gender relationship, and providing justice to the weaker section like scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, OBC are three components of our search for equality. This we have to underline. And the next point you are talking about to economic inequality. Yes, economic inequality is as great threat to Indian democracy as far as we have to understand. At the time of independence, India had a landlord class controlling the land. and they were known as talukdar, jamindar in various parts of India, and they controlled the vast section of the society where tenants were working. There was no concept of occupancy tenants. They were exploited by the tenants were exploited by the landlord class. And Indian state, in the 46 election manifesto before independence, before coming to form the Constituent Assembly, they also declared in the election manifesto going for Zamindari abolition. That's the most critical point, that landlordism cannot remain or cohabit with the political democracy. This is what the experience of Pakistan we are finding. Pakistan, without implementing land reform, when it is having political democracy is threatened by the landlord class with the help of their sons and daughters who are generals and civil servants. Whereas in India, we have succeeded to remove landlord class, which is the biggest blockade in the path of democracy. And that is the most critical aspect of Indian social economic structure, and which Pakistan is unable to do till now. And Pakistan is experiencing turmoil because of the real reason is this, because all the generals come from feudal lord sons, and they control army, and feudal lords support them, and they control the society. This is the most critical aspect. Both economic equality and search for economic equality, search for social equality became a basis for our political democracy.
So I think before we proceed further, let me take up this issue again, so that there is a better clarity on the issue for the students. In fact, as Professor Barik has said, that because of the efforts of the state, the social inequality could be removed to some extent, and it was because of the removal of the landlordism that the equality in terms of the distribution of the land, in terms of the ownership of the land holdings could be given to the owners of the land. And then Professor Barik compared the system to Pakistan, where land reforms could not be successful. Though there is to some extent political equality to some extent, it is, though political inequality also, equality also is not as successful as in India. It's political equality only for a group of people in Pakistan. So, but at the same time, lot of inequalities remain. Now, when we come to our country, though there is a contribution of the state, or the implementation of the constitutional provisions, in the sense that inequality has been removed to some extent in economic field. Like land reforms were introduced, so the cultivators became the owners of the land. At the same time, this group has emerged a very powerful group in the in Indian society, and it has come to capture important positions in political institutions. It has also come to capture important positions in the state apparatus, whether it is police level, police or administration or any other aspects of the Indian state. It has come to occupy an important position. I am talking about those classes who are by and large identified with upper sections of the OBCs, or some of them are referred to by certain scholars as kulaks or the middle caste gentry. They have occupied an important positions, but perhaps at the same time there still remain a section of the society which has not been yet empowered, which has not still reach any level of inequality if we compare them with this. They perhaps belong to those sections in the society which are socially and economically backward and much closer to the even now Dalits. In fact, Dalits also have been empowered, and they also have got a kind of political equality in our country. So I think though equality has been achieved to some extent and inequality has been removed so far as economic aspect is concerned, we will take up this issue. But before this issue, let me just relate another issue to this, that this political, as Dr. Ambedkar also said, that though we are giving political equality, there will be social inequality in the country. When social inequality exists in the country, political equality doesn't have any meaning. So I think a progress has been made, and still it is project is still going on. So it's a process, and in that process certain level of development, certain level of equality has been achieved. Still a lot has to be done. Before we go on to discuss further, I would like Professor Barik to reflect upon how does he look at the inequality which is still there despite the fact that equality has been achieved to some extent. Professor Barik, please, with special reference to the land reforms.
The most critical aspect Jagpal has raised, that we have gone for removing one segment of the rural inequality, that is landlord class. But below landlord class, a new social class has emerged, that is kulak or rich peasantry. They actually control social power, political power, though they do not belong to the most parts of India, and they do not belong to the upper caste, but at the same time they control social power and political power. To break this, we must proceed further to have a land ceiling. Land ceiling, though this act is on paper, somehow or other, most of the states in India are unable to implement this land ceiling. And why it is critical? Because we have a major section of the society whom we say scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. And we ourselves declare that land ceiling brings a lot of surplus land. And that surplus land will be distributed to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe people, because they are landless people, and they were one time untouchable people. Also they were oppressed social classes. At the same time, economically also they were landless people. Majority were landless. Now the attempt is, unless they have access to land, you cannot create an inclusive society. You cannot create, otherwise your society will remain as an exclusive society. Even if you compare with the American system of democracy, where affirmative actions are taking place in favor of blacks, and here we are taking affirmative actions in favor of Dalits. If you compare, that economy is different. That economy is a capitalist economy where only 6 to 7% people depend on land. Here 70% people or 60% people, almost more than 60% people depend on land. And here landlessness is the biggest, you can say, it is the actually landlessness of the vast section of the society who are scheduled caste and scheduled tribe and lower OBC. This landlessness combined with their social backwardness is a biggest threat to our present day democracy, because they themselves can create social turmoil, and they are on the move. Unless though they are political franchised, they have come to political power in many parts of India like in UP, but unless they implement this agenda of land reform, surplus land must be distributed to them. Access to land is a critical, and once you provide the land to them, number two, you have to give them credit, access to land, access to technology. And what we have done, we are trying to not to pursue this policy. This is a weakness of Indian state. The state must pursue this agenda, and why it is not pursued today? Look at 7th 5-year plan. If you compare 7th 5-year plan and 11th 5-year plan we are going to implement, till 7th 5-year plan, every 5-year plan document speaks about land reform. Surplus land should be distributed. That was our agenda in front of our state. Today it is no more, no more in the agenda. And if it is no more in the agenda, that is a sad part of our political democracy. You should have kept as an agenda, and once it is not in the agenda, and it creates further problem, people get disenchanted, alienation. In political democracy historically, the biggest tragedy is this alienation, and wherever alienation is there, if majority of the people alienate, then it creates a problem of anomie. And once anomie is there, political democracy itself becomes non-functional, and it creates problem for itself. And political equality itself is not going to achieve unless economic equality to certain extent in countryside is actually implemented, and land reform is the most critical aspect. Access to land to the Dalits and lower OBC, access to education, access to credit, access to other technology. It is a package. Unless you provide them, unless you empower them, even in our Hindu Act, women are not given, though on the paper, women are given right to control land. The ownership is still with the male person. That means we are unable to create a egalitarian society in terms of gender, in terms of caste equality, and it is the biggest threat to our political democracy.
So I think now one point is clear by now. It is this that the India's democracy search for equality. In this, one aspect which has been covered so far is the implementation of the land reforms. As in the beginning I had mentioned that the state tried to establish egalitarian society through various measures. One is the land reforms, another social welfare measures, and third one the reservation or the affirmative action. So far we have discussed the land reforms. Professor Parikh has pointed out that the land reform introduced introduced equality to some extent, to the extent that ownership in principle, that the cultivators of the land had become the owners. But at the same time, it has not removed the inequality in real sense of the term. In fact, the groups, the social groups which were earlier deprived, which were exploited by the landlords, they became the owners of the land, and they have now emerged as a powerful group. This is number one. Their emergence as a powerful group is has come up with the exclusion of a large number of people who do not have access to land. So access to land has been denied to a large number of sections of the society, though some of them who were exploited earlier, they have benefited from it, and this section has emerged as a very strong group in the Indian politics and Indian society. This is one point which Professor Parikh has made. Another point which he has made is that land reform measures are full of fallacies, and one of the fallacies is that the size of the land holdings is very high. In fact, the land which is above the ceiling limit has not been distributed among the people. Unless such measures are introduced, unless the land which is surplus is distributed among the landless, this inequality will remain. Now the question comes, why has it not been possible? Why the state has not been able to implement land reforms in real sense of the term? Why the ceiling of the land has not been abolished, and why the surplus land has not been distributed? And its reason perhaps lies in the nature of the state, in the nature of the people who are controlling various aspects of the various organs of the state, various segments of the state, whether it is implementing agencies, whether these are the law and order maintaining agencies, and to some extent even the legal authorities had been, in fact, came from the background which had vested interest in the existing land system. So I would like to now move to the next section of our discussion. That is how the affirmative action has helped in removing the inequality from the society. As we all know that because of the reservation policy, which in fact again is in addition to the education which has been imparted to various sections of the society, because of the reservation policies, because of the affirmative action, we have now a large section of the deprived groups, be the Dalits or be the backward classes, who have emerged as a middle class and who have now a voice in the political system. And this voice, their capacity to emerge as a powerful group to lobby or to pressurize, to have the impact in the decision making process, in fact is itself a symbol, an indication that India's search for democracy has been successful to a great extent. Now that a group has emerged already after having benefited from the affirmative action policies, I think we can now discuss it in relation to how it has really impacted the society. How do you look at it, Professor Parekh? Please tell something about the reservation policy also.
Actually, this process of reservation was introduced much before the constitution came into operation. That means it brings actually equilibrium in the system. The political forces which worked in 30s and even Dalits were assertive under the leadership of Ambedkar, and Ambedkar-Gandhi agreement, which is popularly known as the Pune Pact. In that Pune Pact, there was a certain agreement that how Indian constitutional democracy is going to evolve after independence. And this agreement, we have to understand that there was a reservation in the jobs, reservation in schools and colleges or education, also reservation in legislature. That's why this is not a simple affirmative action. This is a political empowerment process which has three dimensions. One is reservation in education, legislature, as well as jobs. As Jagpal has already raised a point that because of education and access to education and access to jobs have succeeded to create a social class and which was the actually aim of the Indian democracy. That democracy, why it was the aim? Because the social elite at the time of independence was virtually narrow social elite in terms of caste. They belong to upper caste and that social elite. That social elite was itself the biggest threat to democracy. And today the social elite has expanded because of inclusive policy through reservation. Now social elite have various other components like backward class elite has come, Dalit elite have come, all elites have merged together. And this is the main aim of political democracy. Why? Because political democracy is succeeding to break that narrowness of Indian social elite. Today narrowness is gone, that cage is broken, that anybody who wants to enter into the social elite is able to enter through help of with the help of education, with the help of jobs, with the help of also various other entrepreneurial activities. Today that is the demand, that reservation should not remain only in the government sector, state sector. It should go beyond that. It should go for private sector. Why? Because in the private sector there is a demand. Why? Because these people have now education, these people have little income, they want to get an opportunity in entrepreneurial activities because they want to expand their economic activities, and that is a way they want to involve in generating wealth, and that is a way system should move. Why? Because then the social elite will turn into more and more economic elite, and once they turn an economic elite, it will like Western democracy. We will have a vast section of this society who will be upper middle class or upper classes who have who controls share of the wealth in terms of various castes and community, and that is what is required to create a homogenization of social elite, which is very much required. Otherwise it was a fragmented social elite. A fragmented social elite will create conflict and violence. A homogenized social elite will try to mediate between diverse social groups, because we have diverse social groups existing in this society. We have Dalits, we have backwards, we have thousands of castes within this Dalits and backwards, we have upper caste people. That's why if you have a homogenization of a social elite where all these social groups are present, then it will be easier to diffuse social tension. It will be easier to diffuse conflict, because political democracy can accommodate conflict and tension to a point. It cannot accommodate large-scale violence. Large-scale violence can threaten democracy wherever large-scale violence between diverse social groups have happened, like in Africa, other parts of, even in Europe, Yugoslavia, old Yugoslavia, the democracy has collapsed. State has collapsed. That's why we should not face that situation. If we share the wealth in terms of diverse social groups, specifically in India, diverse caste groups, diverse religious groups, diverse ethnic groups, because then there will be homogenization of our social elite, and that will bring much more clear vision about what sort of political democracy is going to evolve in Indian society to accommodate diverse social groups, diverse social classes, diverse religious groups. This is the issue today, that Muslim representation, or Muslim is quite a substantive population, around 12% of Indian population. They have a very low representation in jobs, in education, in a legislature. This is the issue debated. If this happens, this will create a tenuous relationship with the political democracy. That's why we should create an opening for them. We have created an opening for Dalits and backwards. We must create an opening for this community. By that, what happens now, we accommodate more and more groups within the social elite, which is going to mediate conflict between diverse social groups, and that is the history of political democracy, which can dilute conflict, which can control tension, which can reduce the violence, and otherwise violence, large-scale conflict, social turmoil can threaten democracy.
I think this may, in this, there is one more thing is happening, which we can take note of. As Professor Barik mentioned, that people from different social background, different social caste groups, and those who were socially deprived, those who came from socially privileged background earlier, they have now making a common group. And that common group, I think, which Professor Barik is referring to, he says homogeneous elite group. I think you say that.
Yeah, homogenization.
Homogenization is taking place. In fact, along with this, something else was happening, though there are internal differences in terms of the social origin of these people. These various, the social origin of the people who are coming from different social backgrounds. They have made a common pool which has certain common points, and it is being also referred to by some scholars as emergence of a middle class. And this emergence of a middle class also shows that dilution in the traditional nature of the caste system. In fact, caste has assumed a new role, and that is a new form. That is also the impact of the democracy's efforts for the equality, democracy's efforts search for equality. That means caste has now become a secular identity. It is no longer the traditional identity where untouchability, though untouchability is existing in several parts of the country in different form, it has undergone a lot of changes. The earlier rigidity of of observing certain rituals, certain norms, which in fact also were related to kind of inequality, they have all vanished. So a kind of secularization has taken place. That means people coming from different background, different social background, they do not discriminate against each other in the public space. A kind of secularization of the caste also has taken place. Having made this point, let me now shift to another aspect. In fact, we have covered so far two measures which have been introduced in search of the equality. One was the land reforms, second was the reservation policies, and now third is welfare measures. In fact, apart from the reservation policies or apart from the land reforms, the state has introduced certain welfare measures which are not directly related to providing the jobs to people in the government sector or private sector, which are also not related to giving people certain properties in terms of right to own the property, right to own the land. Yet these are the measures which help people to improve their conditions, certain welfare measures, certain poverty alleviation programs. Immediately after the independence, such measures were introduced, whether they were in the form of the community development programs or in the form of the extension schemes, or during the 1970s in the form of the 20-point program of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, or now in the form of the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, guarantee schemes. These schemes, though do not completely eradicate the poverty, they do not apply to all sections of the society, yet a sample of the section of the society has benefited from them. And now we all know that in Rajasthan there is a very strong movement going on. A certain group of intellectuals, a section of the civil society, is busy assessing the implementation, assessing the role to see whether the rural employment guarantee scheme has been successful or not. They have found that some sections of the society have definitely benefited from these measures, though there have been impediments, there have been some problems even implementation of these policies. So this is one aspect which we need to reflect upon before we go on to the next. I would like now Professor Barik to see what he has to say on this aspect.
Jagpal has raised a very interesting point, the point about Rural Employment Guarantee Act, which is actually extension of in the mid-70s. We went for rural development projects and diverse rural development projects. We realized that the Indian economy growth is not equitable distributed amongst various sections of the society. Then what we did, we did not believe the philosophy of economic growth which will trickle down to the lowest man. This we did not believe. We came to realize that state must intervene, state must, if political democracy wants to survive, strengthen, and its roots will be strong enough, it is only way by state must create economic opportunities for people in the countryside as well as urban areas. For that they went for diverse rural development projects. In the 70s they went for a lot of anti-poverty projects like giving them work, food for work, and that food for work, the study shows, after introducing food for work, we came to know that food was, price of the food remained cheap, and people had some access to employment as well as food, because hunger is a very serious threat to democracy anywhere in the world, because food right and political democracy both do not go together. That's why to tackle hunger, we started introducing that. Now we came to realize that a large section of the rural people who are poor, who are marginal section of the society, they are actually no employment in the countryside. And somehow or other we have not succeeded to invest in the agriculture or rural infrastructure, and we have not developed a suitable technology by which the growth would have been continuous. We have still major section of the Indian people depend on agriculture, and we found quite a substantive population who remain without employment, and they are migrating to city, and cities are unable to cope with those people. Then the government or state today decided to introduce Rural Employment Guarantee Act, and it is a very novel act, novel project. Why it is a novel project? You are trying to, first time it is an act, it is not a program like food for work. Program and act are two different. Program is, state is not bound to provide you work, whereas here with the act, here citizen is entitled to get work and state is supposed to provide them work. This is the difference. That the difference between two program and act. Rural Employment Guarantee Act, if a group of landless laborers go to this block office or Tahsil office, demand that you give us work, and within 10 days or 15 days they are supposed to be provided work, and nearby That is one. And second condition is nearby. And third condition is that it will minimum wage, which is fixed by the state. They have to provide minimum wage. Fourth condition, that it will not discriminate between man and woman. Fifth condition, that every poor family should get one, at least one labor get employment. And we have introduced in the beginning, first phase, we introduced 250 districts, which 250 districts, poorest districts of this country, we introduced the Employment Guarantee Act. And by introducing this, we came to realize we have succeeded to generate employment for quite these poor people, number one. Number two, in the various states have created various opportunities. For instance, in Andhra, what they have done, this money which is paid as a wage is not going to be given by the government to the labor directly, because there was a misappropriation. The fear of misappropriation was there. That's why now it is deposited in a post office or rural bank, and everybody has an employment guarantee card. With the, if you look at that card, you will find now they have some deposit in their account in the either post office or in the rural bank branches, and this has created a new opportunity. Why? Because they will be getting that wage and they can keep little money in the bank. This will create a saving culture. At their critical moment, they can withdraw that money. And third thing, what we have done, we, besides the administration, which is district administration is looking into this monitoring aspect, we have given a chance to the social auditing. Many civil societies, many scholars, many NGOs, they are entering into the auditing this Employment Guarantee Act. By that they are finding that whether really money is used, whether there is this act doesn't allow contractors to play role, and wherever a contractor is there, social auditing is questioning them, and with the right to information, we have right to information is playing very helping hand here, because any NGO or any civil society group can go and inquire and see the master role. Whether how many people have got employment, what sort of wage you have given, what sort of social property, social asset it has created, a small embankment or pond or a school building or anything which have created. All these things now can come to our public purview.
So I think Professor Barik, now in fact we have so far discussed the major issues involved in India's search for democracy. As Professor Barik and me, both we have discussed the issue, is that three measures of the government so far. One was the land reforms, another reservation policies, and third welfare measures. They have contributed to a significant extent to the removal of inequality from our society. This point has come up quite clearly in this discussion. But then there are 2-3 more important issues which still remain to be talked about, remain to be discussed. If not now, because not much time is left, then sometimes in the future we will take up these issues. One is that, can we generalize from the observations about the removal of inequality in our country in the light of these three measures, three aspects: land reforms, reservation and social welfare policies? Can we generalize from that? My opinion is that we cannot generalize, because depending on the local circumstances, depending on the legacy, historical legacy of that particular place, depending on the movement of the civil society organizations, the situation varied from place to place. Now the most important challenge now which has come for the before the democracy in India is the globalization. And because the state is withdrawing, market is coming up, the new issue has come up, whether the state which is withdrawing, which is retreating, and market which has come up, will it continue the efforts of the Indian state, the efforts of the Indian democracy for the search of equality? This issue remains, and I think it needs to be debated in greater detail. And I end my today's discussion here only. Thank you very much.